Okay, let's hop right on in here. So I'm sure you guys heard that Missouri executed a person. You know what I've been seeing a lot of, and I almost wrote it myself with the caption. I almost wrote Missouri executes an inmate. I was like, it's a person. Like, why do I have to label him as an inmate? It's a human being. I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And so I've been trying to make a concerted effort to do that. And I think I put it in the caption for the video that this is the third person Missouri has executed this year, and I believe the 14th person executed in the country. You're gonna check on that, John? But I believe that's what it was. So I'm gonna read a little bit about what happened here yesterday before we go into it. The state of Missouri on Tuesday executed Marcellus Williams shortly after the Supreme Court rejected a request to delay the execution. The State Department of Corrections said he was pronounced dead at 6:10 p.m. Central Time. Williams, who had maintained his innocence in the 98 stabbing of Felicia Gale in a St. Louis suburb, was put to death by lethal injection. We hope this gives finality to a case that has languished for decades, said Missouri Department of Corrections. The St. Louis County prosecuting attorney Wesley Bell, who sought to have the conviction overturned, said this outcome did not serve the interest of justice. Marcellus Williams should be alive today. There were multiple points in the timeline when decisions could have been made that would have spared him the death penalty. If there is even a shadow of doubt of innocence, the death penalty should never be an option. Now, that's something I don't know about you guys. I can't remember the last time I've seen anything like that, where a prosecutor said, this shouldn't happen. Like the guy who actually tried the case. I never remember seeing that. So we'll go ahead and get everyone's opinions on the situation. We'll start with Dara. What do you think when you ran across this?
I mean, this is just, it's horribly tragic. It's horribly tragic and kind of, I don't know, like you said, unprecedented. The idea that the prosecutor would be speaking up and saying, hey, there has possibly been a miscarriage, has likely been a miscarriage of justice here. Do not do this. And they pushed ahead and did it anyway. And I heard something about this governor, and correct me if I'm wrong, being the same person who pardoned that couple that pulled their guns on Black Lives Matter protesters. He pardoned them, but wouldn't consider clemency for this guy, Marcellus Williams. So yeah, I can only hope that what comes out of this case is that it turns an even brighter spotlight on the whole idea of capital punishment and just how barbaric it is, how unjust it is, how unnecessary it is. It doesn't even provide a deterrent necessarily against murder. It's not as though murder rates in states with capital punishment, it's not as though murder rates are lower in states with capital punishment. It's not, it doesn't even succeed in the function that it is supposed to succeed in. So there's not a whole lot, that's really bolstering this as an argument for it being a fair or a just punishment. I think this is a tragic, kind of in the same way that George Floyd was, a tragic case that hopefully will represent a shift in thinking, of a lot of folks who are observing this, who can see that this is very blatantly unjust. And unfortunately, it takes that sometimes for things to change.
Yeah, no, we talk a lot about on this show about topics where there is a clear and obvious right answer, where the middle ground is not where the truth lies. There's one side is clearly correct. You can think about things like the conflict with Israel and whatever you want to call it. There's a clear and correct, obvious side. You want to talk about universal health care. There's a clear and correct, obvious side. You want to talk about a lot of things. One side is just the evidence backs it up. This is one of the most clear cases of that. And I'm not necessarily talking about Marcellus Williams, but the death penalty in general makes no sense. No matter what argument you make for it, it's wrong. It costs more than it cost to have someone in prison for life. And that is because it takes a long legal process. But the reasoning behind that is because if you don't have a long legal process, people end up being killed who are innocent. So if you're going to shorten it and make it cheaper, well, you're going to end up killing more innocent people. There's been 200 people since 1976 who have been found innocent after they were convicted and put on death row. And that's not even including the people who were killed before evidence came out that said they were probably innocent. So you are, no matter how you slice it, willingly killing innocent people. and it doesn't deter crime. There's absolutely no evidence that it deters crime. And possibly, like, it could give closure to the families and loved ones of victims. Well, that's also not really true. There's no psychological evidence that shows that victims' loved ones are better off because of the death penalty, because they're just dragged through trials for decades and decades and decades. And even if they get closure, it's not till 40 years after the crime was committed. So it doesn't make any sense. And in this case specifically, you have the family of the victim saying, no, we don't want this guy to be killed. And the state did it anyway. It makes no sense. There's no argument to be made here other than, you know what, I just want to kill people. That's really the only argument at the end of the day that these people have.
Yeah. So like Dara was talking about, you're right. The governor of Missouri, he did pardon the McCloskeys, I think their name was, the family that held the guns on the Black Lives Matter marchers. And if I remember correctly, people can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but I thought that there was some sort of death penalty moratorium that Missouri had, and he reversed it when he became governor. And so this is I've said this plenty of times when I talk about death penalty. So for me, like, I remember having these thoughts when I was younger, and then in college I had to write a paper on it when I changed my mind about death penalty, because I will admit that just my lizard brain, death penalty makes sense to me. That if you kill somebody, you forfeit your right to live. That makes sense. But once you see how it's applied, and the fact that, you know, the Innocence Project, John, you brought up how nearly 300 people since of the last 50 years have been executed innocent, and they didn't do it. And you had like the racial disparities, that not only are Black people just across the board are more likely to be convicted. The Republicans love bringing up the, 13% of the population, 50% of the murders, and they never bring up the fact that Black people account for 50% of all exonerations. Like, Black people are wrongly convicted at a 50% rate. And that applies to the death penalty too. And one of the reasons the prosecutor in this particular case said that the death penalty shouldn't have applied here was because of how the case was held, and that there was someone who mishandled, I think, the knife. Like, the victim was stabbed, and someone mishandled the knife, and so they weren't able to get, a positive ID on the fingerprints and everything. Jurors were struck from the case just because they were Black. And this is also, so a lot of people are saying that, they executed an innocent man. I don't know. I don't know if he was in or not, but it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter. That penalty is bad either way, honestly. And like Dara, you were talking about, there's no evidence. Not only is there no evidence that the death penalty actually acts as a deterrent for murder, history has proven the exact opposite. You don't need to go far back in time to when the king would execute you for stepping on his property or something. Murder rates were higher back then. Like, we used to have the death penalty across the board for a lot of things. And I think the last time there was a non-murder capital punishment was something like the 60s. Like, for a long time, people were executed for things that weren't just murder. And as we've decreased the use of the death penalty, the murder rate has gone down. So it's just it just kind of shows that if you really fight for the death penalty, all you're doing is, I can't remember which one of you said it, you just like killing people. And I don't think you'll be surprised to see this, but there's a certain segment of the population that really enjoys this. So there was a study put out this last year, on November 2023, that 40% of the U.S. population said the death penalty is applied fairly in the United States. And then it shows a breakdown by party lines here. Republicans believe the death penalty is fair at a 70% rate. 7 out of 10 Republicans say, "Oh yeah, this system, it's perfectly just. We don't see a problem with this." Democrats are at 28, and overall, 53% of Americans support the death penalty, and which is, I have to say, that is a lower number than I would have guessed, because I haven't really looked at this in a long time. But I remember, I guess probably the early 2000s when I started looking, it was like 65, 66%. So public opinion is slowly shifting on it, but not quickly enough.
The thing I need to call out there is, what is it, 48%, 47% think it, or what? How many percent said it was unfair?
47% of Americans said it was unfair.
But 53% support the death penalty, which means there's 6% of the American population who thinks the death penalty is unfair, but thinks we should kill these motherfuckers.
But think we should do it anyway. That's true.
Like, that's insane.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. I know, although I can see that. I can see them thinking that. I can see them thinking that, well, it might be unfair, but it's what we have to do. You know, it has to be this way. We have to kill some folks if we want society to work. So yeah, you're right. It's a good catch, John. That absolutely is the case. But I don't know. This is just a really sad situation. And Dara, what do you think? Like, do you think there's any hope for society getting better? I was kind of happy to see the number had dropped to 53 because in my recent memory, it was always wildly popular with people because we saw stuff like this all the time. The first one that I remember is it was a guy in California, like Tukey something. I can't remember his name. Yeah, but that was the first time I saw like a huge upswell against the death penalty. There was another one in Texas where they executed this lady. And and then there was someone who was like mentally challenged, executed, but it never seems to really go anywhere. Like it doesn't, like Texas still has the death penalty, Missouri still does. California is on a moratorium, but what do you think is going to happen in the future here with this?
I mean, I don't know. We're in the age of social media now, and so these sorts of stories, I think, are able to create much more of a groundswell than they even were when we were kids. You know, and I think the idea of a very public mishandling of this type of situation it probably has the ability to create a shift much more than it did 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. And I again reference the George Floyd killing. I mean, I'm doing some content right now against the around the idea of like all of the DEI measures and things that companies adopted after the George Floyd killing that are now being pulled back. And so there is that tendency to have this upswell of support and outcry about a situation. And then just a few years later, we sort of forget, the immediacy is not there anymore. So there is that chance that, we're all in an uproar about it now and we're laser focused on it. Maybe some things begin to change and maybe there is backtracking a little bit later. But I think we are in a much better position just with the existence of social media and the ability of people to organize around issues like this. And the unfortunate fact that there seems to need to be sacrificial lambs that are put out there where we have to see miscarriages of justice in the way that we're seeing right now in order for things to be shaken up and for things to change. So I do believe that change is possible, more so than it ever has been before.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with you, Dara. I don't,
John. Our resident pessimist, John.
Well, no, I'm usually an optimist here. Usually I'm the one sitting here like, yo, there's hope. On this issue, as much as I just said, it's so clear and obvious what the right answer is. I just don't think it's possible to generate the political will needed to make the change over something that has such a small effect. Like the concept of being wrongfully convicted and sentenced to death by the government is terrifying, utterly terrifying. But we're talking about something that happens a couple times. Like the damage being done by it is more on a philosophical level than it is on an actual practical level. And there's always, when you're fighting with the people to get rid of the death penalty who want to support it, there's going to be compromises that you are going to want to make, and the death penalty just ain't going to be it. Unfortunately, saving those couple lives every year that might be wrongfully convicted and sentenced to death just isn't going to be worth it in any other compromise we can make about the justice system. So I don't see it actually ever changing. It probably will just continue on forever until society has a way different view about the death penalty where it becomes politically feasible. But I could be wrong. I would love to be wrong.
The fact that it's decided by states, I think, is what really drags it down. I can see federally it dying or something, but Alabama is probably not going to get rid of it anytime soon or something like that. So I think that's really what's going to drag it down because societally, it just does take a lot. It takes something big. You know what it'll take? You know how we've been arguing that felons should get the right to vote and Republicans never cared about it until Donald Trump became a felon? He should be able to vote. I'm not saying we should give Donald Trump the death penalty. That's not what I'm saying. Just so anyone knows, that's what I'm not calling for here. But it would take, something like that, someone that they like having it happen to, and that might cause something to change on it. But I don't know. It's just we had to talk about it. There's just no way to, Not bringing that up, so I wanted to make sure that we discussed that, because like I said, it is pretty sad, but that's the way it is.
All right, guys, thank you so much. You made it to the end of the episode, where you get to hear me congratulate you on being such a wonderful member of our audience. Of course, like, subscribe if you haven't already, and even leave a comment, as long as you don't say you're a black Nazi. Now, if you want another place to leave amazing, supportive comments on, Dara, if our guests liked what they heard from you, our audience liked what they heard from you today, where else can they find you?
They can find me on all social media platforms as Dara Star Tucker, Dara with 1 R, Star with 2. On Instagram, oddly enough, I'm Dara Tucker B, and I'm also that on Threads, because those 2 platforms are connected. So yeah, Dara Star Tucker on TikTok, on YouTube, even Facebook. Yes, I'm over there. Instagram and Threads, I'm Dara Tucker B.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dara. Thank you guys for watching. If you're watching right now, you are our favorite viewer. Be sure to check out every episode that we did. We talked about Clay Higgins, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and Mike Johnson, who Mike Johnson is fantastic, folks. His career is fucked so hard that his son's going to get a notification about it. So just check out sometime, and we'll see you later, folks. All right. So